been wanting to talk about this topic for a while, but I've been busy working in TV, so I've not had a chance to, and I've not been streaming. But I wanted to talk about Doctor Who's future kind of more broadly as to whether or not we are going to be getting more Doctor Who after the second season next year, and also the spin-off that's currently in production, The War Between the Land and the Sea. And I think there's a lot of things here that the general public and Doctor Who fans more broadly just aren't really thinking about and may not be so privy to as to the future of the show. And it's not good news, I'm afraid. But let's dive into this first and what sort of brought on this new part of the discussion. Ncuti Gatwa was a guest on the Graham Norton chat show a couple of nights ago. And when he was live on the sofa, because what they do with the Graham Norton show is that they film it on the Thursday evening and then they edit it on the Friday and then they broadcast it on the Friday night. But people who were in the audience for the Graham Norton show said that Ncuti Gatwa said that the next series of Doctor Who is all going well. We did the second series this year, the Christmas special is coming up, and we are filming a third series next year. That seems quite promising. If the leading man seems to think that they're doing some more filming next year for Doctor Who, that they're doing a third season, he specifically says that we're doing a third series next year, then of course that means that they're definitely doing a third series, right? Well, Russell T Davies has issued what some are saying is contradictory statements regarding Doctor Who's future after Season 2, but I think that these statements don't necessarily contradict each other. But in Comic-Con in July, he talked to SFX magazine and he talked about the future of the show with a third series in conjunction with Disney. And he says, quote, "It's an industry decision. It's like any business. These things take time. I think the decision will come after the transmission of Season 2. That's what we're expecting. That's what we've always been heading towards." And then, a month earlier, he was talking to the Radio Times, and he talks about Ncuti's scheduling, because I think next month, or maybe even later on in October, he's starring in a play, The Importance of Being Earnest, on the West End, so he's going to be busy throughout all of the winter period, and then after that, that's when they can go and work on Doctor Who. He says, Ncuti's off to do a play, The Importance of Being Earnest, and so we're coming back after that. Amazingly, we might be shooting these scripts early next year, 2025. Those scripts have to be ready by August for prep, and this was a statement he made around June time. So, do these statements necessarily contradict each other? I don't think they do, because now that Doctor Who has been outsourced as it's no longer an in-house production being made by the BBC. It's no longer being made solely by the BBC license fee. Bad Wolf is a private company that works with the BBC to produce shows for a public service broadcaster, but it also has its own independent budget because it is a private company. So there's nothing to assume that Bad Wolf aren't doing pre-production, aren't commissioning scripts, aren't working on pre-production stuff, getting quotes for sets, getting quotes for locations, figuring out the logistics of a potential shoot with the scripts that we know that Rusty Davis has been working on. He says that he's got some scripts for a Series 3 if they decide to do that. And then what they can do is that once Season 2 is broadcast and they get a go-ahead or a no from Disney or the BBC, then they can pull the plug then, having not spent that much money. So my assumption is that they are ready or getting ready for a third series, and they'll know by the end of Series 2 what the deal is, whether or not there's a budget, and whether or not the budget's being slashed, whether or not they have to put the show on a hiatus or whatever. Either way, they're probably planning for these contingencies. And I think that these statements don't necessarily contradict each other. Those scripts have to be ready by August for prep. They're probably prepping Series 3 scripts in case they get the go-ahead, and the BBC likely isn't funding it. Now, when it comes to Doctor Who's future post-Season 2, we have to remember that there's already a show that has been greenlit and commissioned and is, currently filming The War Between the Land and Sea. And I think that Doctor Who's future post The War Between the Land and Sea is assured, as in, I definitely think we're getting a third series, because this spin-off only started filming a couple of months ago, so the numbers and all the figures and all the data for Season 1, or Series 14 as fans will call it, that data's already in, the numbers are already in, and they thought, let's press on with this spin-off regardless of the public perception of those figures, regardless of what those figures were. And this spin-off, The War Between the Land and Sea, they're not going cheap for it. They've got some big-name talent, and they're filming abroad. Here's Colin McFarlane on a boat in Mallorca, and also Russell Tovey as well. They've gone abroad. That's not cheap. They're doing big location shoots. They've got some big-name actors for this. What I think could have happened is that if the latest season of Doctor Who did not do well, and they thought, okay, so the original Disney deal is 2 seasons and a spin-off. If the season didn't do well, what we'll do is that we'll end Doctor Who's run with Disney on this 3rd season. We'll put the spin-off on the back benches for now, maybe pick it up later. But instead, can you imagine a universe where Doctor Who's current legacy ends with the war between the land and sea? Like, genuinely, that would be like doing series 8 and 9 of Doctor Who under Stephen Moffat with Jenna Coleman and Peter Capaldi starring, and then ending it with Class and not doing a season 10. Like, that's kind of what the comparison for this would be. Like, they clearly thought that season 1 did well enough to justify doing a spin-off as well. I know that the contract would have said 2 seasons and a spin-off, but they could have said, as long as we give you the exact same episodes that you're paying for and funding, we don't need to do the spin-off, we'll just do a 3rd season of Doctor Who. So the fact that they're pushing forward with the spin-off, and they're still going pretty big with it by the looks of it, location filming, like I said, it's not cheap, then it kind of shows that there is, internally, a big amount of confidence within the company, Bad Wolf and the BBC, when it comes to Doctor Who. And we've known this for the past couple of years. We've looked at all of these BBC Studios earnings reports for the past couple of years. Like, I won't go through all of them now, we've gone over them before, but BBC Studios over the past 3 or 4 years has been citing record high profits year on year on year, and whenever it does that, it routinely cites Doctor Who. For example, for this one as well, for the years 2022-2023, during the last financial year, activity to underpin future growth included long-term deals to bring key content to new audiences, such as the groundbreaking new deal for Doctor Who with Disney Plus, as Rusty Davis returns with a new Doctor in Ncuti Gatwa. Whenever there's a earnings report for the BBC Studios, which is the commercial arm of the BBC, Doctor Who is always one of the big shows cited as the reason why BBC Studios is doing so well. And of course, when it comes to Doctor Who, the licensing agreements alone are bringing in BBC Studios an awful lot of money. Like, we heard this past week that Total Film, one of the big UK film and TV magazines, is shutting down. But, Doctor Who magazine bloody persists. We've also got things like the Big Finish licensing agreements. We've got the character options toys as well. Even this past week, we've seen brand new Amazon listings for upcoming Target novels. If the books weren't selling, they wouldn't keep making them. They're doing a Charles Darwin and Frida Kahlo, Icons of History book series. They're clearly shifting all of these books and all of these products from Big Finish to the magazine to the character options toys. They're clearly shifting, otherwise they wouldn't keep renewing the license, they wouldn't keep making them. So it kind of shows that, in regards to the merchandise, Doctor Who, and by proxy BBC Studios, is doing incredibly well. But when it comes to the BBC, it has 3 core pillars commercially. It has Top Gear, Strictly Come Dancing, and Doctor Who. And in these turbulent times, I won't go into the details just for international viewers or those who don't want it all repeated, but Strictly Come Dancing is in its 20th anniversary right now, but it's had a lot of PR nightmares when it comes to abuse and toxic behaviour and bullying and harassment behind the scenes that has completely sort of maybe scuppered a lot of enthusiasm for that series. Top Gear is currently on hiatus after one of the hosts got injured in a crash, and we have no idea if it's coming back. Of those 3 pillars, Top Gear, Strictly Come Dancing, and Doctor Who is the only column standing right now commercially for BBC Studios, even if it was doing poorly in the viewing figures, which it's not. We've got the comparisons, we've got the figures and the datas. It's still one of the biggest dramas broadcasting right now. It's one of the most talked about things. It shifts the most home media units, it's got all the licensing agreements, and it's also got, by sheer numbers, one of the biggest sizes. Take all that into account, there's no way that BBC are not making more Doctor Who while it tries to find more commercial pillars. There's no BBC genre show at the moment. There's no sci-fi, there's no horror, there's no regular, easily repeatable, high-end drama format outside of Doctor Who within its control at the moment. So there's always things like The Traitors, but of course you want the drama, you want the scripted programming. The BBC has a remit for this stuff as well, it kind of has an obligation to not just make game shows, to not just make dancing shows and crime dramas and stuff like that. However, one other partner here as well is Disney, who, whether or not they fund it, remains to be seen. But this report back in August from Variety, Disney commits $5 billion to the UK and European productions over the next 5 years. Disney is set to invest at least $5 billion in production across the UK and continental Europe over the next 5 years, according to Jan Kopen, the company's European chief. Kopen, who oversees Disney's operations in Europe, the Middle East and Africa, expressed optimism about the continued viability of superhero films, etc., etc. Deadpool and Wolverine, produced at UK's Pinewood Studios, already raked in $903 million globally. We feel like we're on a roll again with movies which are fantastic, etc. So yeah, they're wanting to invest a lot more money into the UK and into Europe as well. Disney wanting to invest more money into the UK would also include investing money into something like Doctor Who. And Disney also have, for the rest of the year, in terms of just films, The Lion King Mufasa and Moana 2, and they're likely to be massive hits. They'll likely go into 2025 flush with cash, especially after Deadpool and Wolverine and Inside Out 2, which came out this past summer, and just between those two have grossed over $3 billion. Just those two films between those two, $3 billion at the box office. So I think that the BBC have an incentive to keep making Doctor Who at the current time. Disney want to invest more into the UK and European productions over the next 5 years, which might not include Doctor Who, but it could do. I mean, like I said, $5 billion in the UK and Europe. Like, what's an extra 50 million in regards to propping up the budget for a show to get international distribution on one of the UK's biggest shows? Like, in comparison to what they're spending on other streaming shows, that's like pocket change. That's barely anything. So I think that Disney and the BBC are up for it still. We've not got the exact figures for Doctor Who Disney Plus streaming figures, like the actual specific audience size or the numbers of minutes watched or whatever, but we do know, at least from the rankings during the weeks that those episodes broadcast, like it did really well in international territories like Brazil, like France, like Portugal, and others. Like, we obviously don't have the specific numbers, but, you know, it ranked pretty well. However, there's one big elephant in the room here, though, as to whether or not we'll even be able to make more Doctor Who in the coming years. And it's something that a lot of discussions, a lot of conversations about Doctor Who's future seems to strangely omit, because the UK TV and film industry right now is in cataclysmic freefall. So this is from Beck 2 a couple of months ago. It's using data from September 2023, but I still think that the data applies to now, October 2024. A September 2023 survey found that 80% of the workforce in the TV and film industry have been directly impacted by last year's SAG-AFTRA industrial action, and also general economic factors in the UK, which means that hardly anything is filming right now. 80% of freelancers in the TV and film industry were out of work last September. So what happened during COVID was that, despite it being under the category of essential work, because broadcasting in the UK government's assessment is technically a vital job, they did not get any sort of furlough or any sort of assistance or any sort of grants or anything in order to prop up the industry during COVID when you couldn't really film anything. So as a result of that, from what I've been told, around 60% of those who worked in the TV and film industry, they left the industry and have not come back. And this September 2023 survey found that 80% of the 40% of people that remained are not in work because they're not commissioning anything right now, because adverts are not worth as much as they used to, because we have a cost of living crisis where people can't really afford to buy anything. Adverts don't really have much sway if people can't afford the basics, whether they have to choose between heating and eating. Inflation is out of control. Energy prices as well makes it incredibly difficult to fund month-long productions that you'd need for scripted TV work. So as a result, productions are shuttering left, right, and centre. Aardman, this past week, have cut 20 jobs with nearly $1 million loss in the past year, despite the fact that they've had a pretty busy couple of years. They made the Chicken Run sequel for Netflix. They've got a new Wallace and Gromit film coming out this Christmas. They've been making those BBC Creature Comfort adverts, but they lost nearly $1 million this past year, and they're losing 20 jobs in a pretty small company, all things considered, in terms of just the sheer size of it. It's kind of mad that a UK institution that gave us Wallace and Gromit and Chicken Run and Creature Comforts, they are really feeling the pinch right now. BBC Children's is hitting massive layoffs. In Media City, in Manchester, the city where I live, the main children's home is basically an empty building right now because they're cutting down all of the commissioning because the BBC can't afford to make children's and education anymore in that city. The building's empty. It's just full of chairs and desks and offices now. Further cuts to the BBC as well. It's just lost 115 editorial and production roles. Like, the UK TV and film industry is the number one financial export that the UK has by orders of magnitude. We've gone over the figures before. The second most valuable export in the UK is precious minerals and metals at £40 billion per year. The UK media industry is worth £140 million per year. And does this seem like the type of industry that is actually the number one thing that the UK has to offer? It used to be cars, but then Brexit happened and that industry collapsed. So, like, the industry is in free fall at the moment. And, like, I know that these statistics are from September, but honestly, folks, it's been 13 months since that survey was done. Has anything like materially changed? There's been a new government, but has a new budget been introduced? Have new emergency regulations or new emergency procedures gone into place to help the industry? Have there been new grants? Have there been new funding models? Has there been a change to the BBC licence fee in order to ensure that it can make children's TV or that it can invest in nations and regions and editorial decisions? You know, has anything meaningfully changed in the past 13 months? If this figure of 80% has changed, it's changed by single-digit percentages at the most. You know, maybe 10 at a push. But it's still dire out there, folks. And people are leaving the industry in droves. You see stories on Twitter and Facebook and podcasts all the time that, you know, people who have been going like years, like constantly in work, haven't had the phone ring for months. And this is the UK's number one financial export. We've got a new culture secretary since the last election, Lisa Nandy. She's basically missing in action. She's not said anything. She's not proposed anything. She's clearly waiting for the new budget to come for in the next few weeks and months, but there's no like announcement of a plan. There's no Donald Trump, I have a concept of a plan. You know, it's a low bar, but that's still not been met. You know, this Guardian article as well, from a month ago, Survive to 2025, UK TV production firms fight to stay afloat in slump. The UK's TV production sector has adopted the mantra survive to 2025 as a perfect storm of market pressures has left a £400 million financial hole, leaving hundreds of small companies in a fight to stay afloat this year. This week, the industry body PACT, which has 850 TV production companies as members, revealed that cash-strapped British broadcasters slashed spend on commissions to the lowest level since the height of the pandemic. And literally, they couldn't make TV logistically, for the most part. That's how bad the comparisons are. The impact has left the hundreds of small independent TV producers, the indies, that make up 85% of the UK's production sector, scrambling to make ends meet as they pin their hopes on a market recovery this year. More than 70% of indies that took part in a recent survey by the industry body Indie Lab said they faced the risk of closure by May next year if there is not an improvement in market condition. 70% of indies make up 85% of the production sector. They could close by next May. So, when you're asking, is there going to be more Doctor Who after Season 2, after Between the Wall and the Land and Sea, who's going to make it? Who's going to be the camera operators? Who's going to direct it? Who are going to be the runners? Who's going to be in the costume department? Like, no one's going to stay in the industry if no one's commissioning, if no one's hiring, if there's no chain that takes people from runners at university learning TV production and film production at university to getting their first jobs making the tea and coffees to stepping up the ladder. If they don't have these shows in children's and entertainment and editorial, if there's no ladder for these people to work in the industry, there's not gonna be an industry. So the idea of Doctor Who is going to get cancelled because it's gone woke, it's gone broke, is literally the opposite of what's happened. If Doctor Who doesn't come back, it's not because it went woke, it's because of anti-woke austerity policies. It's because of, you know, a failure to commit to the number one industry that this country has, aside from transphobia. Sure, there are some big productions that are happening right now or in the near future. Disney are going to want to maybe film some more stuff in the next few years with Star Wars and Marvel, etc. There's a Peaky Blinders film that is currently shooting in Manchester right now for Netflix. There's also going to be potentially that new Harry Potter series for Warner Brothers. However, those are American companies. Netflix is an American company. Warner Brothers is an American company. Bridgerton, massive show, big UK production. However, Netflix and Shondaland, who's the production company who makes it for Netflix, they're based in America. So, yes, good short term for money to come in, to pay the freelancers, to pay the UK workers, and then they get taxed, and that goes back to the state, and that uses to fund things. However, the money, the broad profits, are not staying in this country. They're going to American companies who are using UK resources because we're not investing in anything here. We're not investing in the BBC. We're not investing in companies like Aardman. We're not investing in our own infrastructure. And the idea that maybe, the BBC gets privatized and gets sold off, yeah, that could happen. But do you want to know who the first people would be who would pick up all that infrastructure? All of those empty BBC buildings, the camera equipment, all of the infrastructure that would make broadcast TV and live TV, it would just go to the first person who puts in the highest bid, like Disney or Warner Brothers or another American company, and then the money would just leave again. It's astonishing to me that we have this crisis right now, and no one talks about this. We're talking every other week on the news that the steel industry is going down, and this industry is doing but no one talks about the TV and film industry, which, like I said, is the number one export that the UK has. Disney, Spider-Man fan, is also a American company that will have short-term investments in the UK, but the money, the profits will go back to America, will go back to Disney. This is a story from The Times, which Politics UK on Twitter surmises. Angela Rayner will step in to allow plans to build a £750 million film studio in Buckinghamshire after it was rejected by the council. The studio is set to bring £3.2 billion in investments to the local area over a decade. Oh yeah, that's great. If nothing's filming in it, then it's just a £750 million storage unit. It's just an excessively expensive storage unit for the equipment that's not going to be used because no crew's going to be working on it. No shows are going to be made in it. I don't even care about the arguments for AI at the moment because it's a long-term issue, but in the short term, it's not complex enough or powerful enough to be able to do anything close to the what's being made at the moment. You have to remember that workers make it. I'm in Wales currently as we lost our steel, film and TV industry as the industry keeping the Welsh economy afloat. Yeah, there was even that Welsh, there was that Doctor Who financial report as well, talking about how it brings in £600 million, or it's brought in £600 million to the Welsh economy in the past 20 years. That's a lot of money from one show. I've been thinking about how there's basically no sitcoms on the BBC. There's The Cleaner and that's about it. Yeah, I was even talking about this the other day, that in the 70s and the 80s, you would go to the BBC studios and you'd bump into somebody all the time, every day, making a iconic comedy. Blackadder, Fawlty Towers, Only Fools and Horses. You'd bumping into iconic comedies from that time, situational comedies, and now we're lucky if we get a couple of them a year. The Cleaners one at the moment, there's a good low-budget one, Alma's Not Normal, that is shot in Salford, but that was one of the few scripted programmes that have been filmed in Manchester over the past year or so. So yeah, there's Ludwig right now, which is sort of kind of a dramedy, more emphasis on drama, a crime dramedy, which got renewed for a second season after its first episode opened to a 2.5 million audience size. So when you look at Doctor Who Space Babies opening with 4 million, okay, yeah, clearly it's doing well when compared to the new current big BBC crime drama with a big cast, a big budget, big marketing push getting just over half of that audience size. Doctor Who is just fine. The numbers, the audience percentage, the audience rankings for Doctor Who, all of that data is on our side in regards to Doctor Who being a current success at the moment. That might not maintain. Like I said, it's been about 4 months since Empire of Death was broadcast, and in person, I have yet to meet a single person who has anything nice to say about it. So let's see how the Christmas special does. Let's see how season 2 does. War Between the Land and Sea, etc. But after that, Doctor Who's future is not certain. But it's not because of the show's gone wokeness. It's not because of the BBC on its own. It's because of these hundreds of turmeric systemic economic failures of the past 15 years, cascading to produce what I can only describe as apocalyptic results. for the TV and film industry. Like, it shouldn't just be, oh, well, Doctor Who come back, in 2025. Will fucking anything come back in 2025? Like, this cannot hold. If 70% of respondents are not working at the time of that survey, and 30% have had no work at all in 3 months, they leave the industry. They take those incredibly unique, brilliant skills and they put it to another sector, which can be good for that sector. Or maybe they just go on job seekers for a few months until, which is perfectly valid. That's what it's there for, and they're entitled to that, and they should get more from job seekers. But yeah, you're going to lose all of this talent. And as Beck 2 points out as well, that this is going to have a disproportionate effect on BAME respondents or other people from marginalized groups. It's not good. It's not good. Bring back Primeval. I think Gregor Vigan has got the right idea. We need to bring back Primeval and make it a yearly production. That will sustain the industry. Go for it.